Please take your seats. The program is about to begin.
And here's the twist.
Introducing Axios co-founder, Mike Allen.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Mike Allen, co-founder of Axios, and welcome to the first Axios AM Live. So people are trickling in from upstairs, so just have a seat. I was just up there, saw Mike and others up there, Abby, and a very witty display up there by the coffee from our partner on this event, Anthropic, a Claude typewriter. So Claude is connected to an IBM Wheelwriter 6. Now, some of us in the audience will remember the IBM Wheelwriter. We discovered two things. One, I type faster than an IBM Wheelwriter. It did not keep up, but Claude does think faster than I do. So that we'll call that a tie. In Washington, we're blessed to see, do, experience amazing things all the time. Two things about today's event. First, I thank Axios Live and Anthropic for something new, a first. This is Axios AM Live. And the big idea, the why it matters of this event is to bring to life in onstage conversations like we're having backstage here about the three big tectonic plates that Axios CEO Jim Vandehei, along with our co-founder Roy Schwartz, have been writing about the changes in our politics, in our technology, which we're living upstairs, and in how we get information, our reality, how all of that is changing. So we welcome the people watching around the world. You can follow along at hashtag AxiosAM Live. And all of this is in the context of America's 250th birthday. And I had the privilege of talking Sunday to a group of people who were in town, none of them Washingtonians. And they were just taking a beat to soak in this incredible moment, this incredible place that we sometimes take for granted. I had a friend, Reed, who, when he would take his kids to church from Virginia into DC every Sunday morning, he would pause and as they went over the bridge, have them look at the monuments, just to remind them of how amazing the water is that we swim in. So after Axios AM Live, we have something even bigger coming, an Axios event series focused on America's next chapter. Tied to the 250th, throughout 2026, we'll be convening leaders from across manufacturing, energy, politics, to examine the decades ahead and always leave you smarter, faster about what matters. A couple things I've been asked to remind you. One, your badge has a QR code with Wi-Fi, run of show, and details about this amazing place. And I want to pause to thank Planet Word for welcoming us. We've had a few events here, and behind the curtain, a fun fact, we did a retreat for our national news staff last week, and our copy editors all came here as a field trip, as a place that reveres and amplifies the word as they do. So we appreciate Planet Word. Be sure, all throughout the event, so if you get tired of me, you can visit our coffee shop powered by Anthropic. You can try the quad wheel rider. And there's an interactive economic index station. And you've seen Jim and me writing about the Anthropic economic index, and you can ask it questions. You can check in on your home state up there. And then after the program, we'll have a reception up there. So thank you for joining us on the live stream. Thank you, Anthropic, for kicking off the first Axios AM Live, which will be annual. Happy 250th. We thank you to our Axios Live colleagues who've been working on this for a year. So happy birthday, America, and welcome to Axios. Here is Axios AM Live.
Richard Hudson represents North Carolina in Congress and now chairs the National Republican Congressional Committee, helping shape the GOP strategy heading into a pivotal election cycle. As Washington debates AI, federal spending, trust, and America's global role, Hudson sits at the center of the political swings and policy fights, defining what comes next for the country and the voters who will shape its future.
Congressman, thank you so much for being here. At Axios, we like to talk a lot about the one big thing, and one of the biggest questions in Washington right now is who is going to control Congress this time next year. A lot of your colleagues are skeptical that Republicans will stay in power, and I know you feel differently. So what makes you so confident that you guys will remain in power?
Well, thank you. It's great to be here on the first AM Live. This is great. No, I'm very confident we're going to hold the House. In fact, I think we'll pick up seats. And the reason is the map favors Republicans. And I was saying this a year ago before redistricting and all that went on. And I think with redistricting gives us a little bit more of an edge on the map. The seats that are up for grabs, there's very few favor Republicans. And so that's advantage one. Advantage two is candidate quality. I'm very proud of the group of candidates we recruited last cycle. When people said we couldn't hold the majority then, I think the candidate quality was one of the secrets why we held. And I think this class of recruits is even better. We've got folks who fit their district, who are very accomplished. I think, the state of Nevada, for example, we really didn't play in Nevada last cycle. Unfortunately, President Trump carried Nevada. That would have been a good opportunity for us. But we've got, for example, Kerry Buck running against Dina Titus. Their primary is actually tonight. But she's one of the best candidates we've ever had. She's a former teacher, principal of the year, married to a retired police officer. Her son's in the military. She's fantastic. She won a Democrat state Senate seat and held it in re-election. She's a great candidate for us, and one of the secrets why we're going to pick up at least one seat in Nevada this time. So we've got the map, candidate quality, and then fundraising. We, for the first time since I've ever seen, we actually have a money advantage. Not only head-to-head NRCC versus DCCC, but R-N.C has a huge advantage over the DNC. And then you've got the Trump world entities, and I've read in Axios and other places that they're planning to spend upwards of $300 million on House races. So that gives us a huge advantage in getting our message out. So, you know, if every metric that you have in elections, we're ahead. And you know, I'm just bullish that, you know, it's going to be very close. I mean, you know, 435 seats, less than 30 are going to determine the majority. But in those 30, we're poised to win.
One topic that's a huge issue for voters, though, is affordability. And a lot of your members have been begging to refocus on affordability, to do more. Do you feel like Republicans have done enough, and do you need to do a third reconciliation bill to address affordability measures?
Well, we've never stopped focusing on the cost of living challenges people are facing out there. You know, that was our campaign message in 2024, because frankly, the Biden administration and Democrats ran our country in the ditch. I mean, we were in dire situation. You look at record inflation, a wide open border, danger in the world. You know, our allies didn't trust us. Our enemies didn't fear us. It was a really tough situation, and the American people said, we're ready to change course and put President Trump back in the White House, put Congress in charge of Republicans. And we're on a rescue mission right now, and we've made a lot of great progress. You know, but it's very rich to have the Democrats who actually broke it say that we're to blame because we hadn't completely fixed it yet. You know, we've made great progress. You look at the policies in the Working Families Tax Cut Act, the One Big Beautiful Bill. Those policies are putting the country back on track. They are making people's lives better. They're driving up wages. You know, we had inflation on a pretty good downward trend before this Iran conflict. You know, we will get to the other side of that Iran conflict at some point. And you know, but you look at crime. I mean, we've secured the border. We're reducing crime in people's neighborhoods. I mean, murder rates are at an all-time low. Crime is down almost everywhere. And people are really feeling the effects of that. So, you know, our job this election is to remind people of where we were just 3 years ago, what policies we've put in place to make their lives better. And by the way, the Democrats, our biggest advantage this election is the Democrats have absolutely no ideas, policies that would affect affordability. Their whole strategy is blame Donald Trump, you know, make it a Donald Trump message. But I think when we lay it out as a choice, do you want to continue down the path we're on with common sense policies, or do you want to go back to crazy? And I like the way that lines up for us.
Like you just said, though, gas prices are really high because of this war in Iran right now, and Republicans spent, you know, years hammering Democrats on high gas prices. It's something you ran on last cycle, the cycle before. If prices don't come down by November, are you worried that it'll affect your ability to keep the House?
Well, I think we just have to lay out the facts to the voters. You know, gas prices right now are high, and that's hurting people. They're not as high as they were under Biden when he raised gas prices on purpose because he wanted people off combustion engines on EVs. I mean, they did that on purpose to the American people, and it was worse than where we are now. What we have is a temporary situation because President Trump said we're not going to allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. By the way, everyone in the world agreed with that until Donald Trump fixed it, and now all of a sudden, because Trump did it, you know, there's Democrats and certain folks in the media questioning whether we should have, you know, allowed the crazy Ayatollah to have nuclear weapons. I mean, it's bizarre. But I think when we lay out those facts for the American people and remind them, again, this is a choice between common sense and crazy. Remember where you were 3 years ago. Do you want to go back there, or do you want to give us a little more time for this rescue mission we're on?
Switching topics a little bit, we've seen Trump do things in recent weeks that have put House Republicans in a tough spot politically, like this weaponization fund, nominating Bill Pulte to serve as DNI. Is Trump making your job harder by continually doing these things that's affecting your ability to pass legislation and the message you want to message for the midterms?
No, I mean, President Trump is a huge asset for us. I mean, he's very engaged, understands the cost of holding the House. You know, the Senate is a whole nother animal because you got to have 60 votes. We've actually never had 60 Republican senators. So we've been in the minority. We've been in the majority without 60 votes. It's obviously better to have the gavels to control the hearings, but the Senate, you can sort of navigate either way. In the House, it's winner take all, as we're demonstrating now with a 2-vote majority. And so we cannot lose the House. And President Trump understands that, and he's very engaged and very helpful. You know, I just don't think when the voters go to the voting booth in November, they're going to base their vote on who's the DNI. I'm not sure many voters even know what a DNI is or what it does. You know, these are DC cocktail party issues. They're not the issues the American people care about. The American people care about, is my neighborhood safe? Do I have opportunity to get a job? You know, what's my personal economic situation? That's what voters care about, and that's why we're going to hold the House.
I know you said Trump is very engaged on helping you guys keep the House, but you know, he recently said he, quote, doesn't care about the midterms. So, I mean, how do you square those two?
What was the context?
He was
You know, I was asked by a reporter a day or two after the Iran war started, how does this impact your midterm? And I said, I don't care, because it's the right thing to do. You know, the president had to do it. I support the president. And it was, you know, you could take me out of context. The NRCC chair doesn't care about the midterms. I mean, that's just not the reality. And President Trump cares deeply. You know, he was asked very similarly, you know, how does this impact? And I don't care how it impacts it, because this is a priority for the world is safer because of what President Trump has done in Iran. And so, you know, that was the context. The context wasn't that he doesn't care what people are going through. You know, he and I have conversations all the time about it. He cares deeply about what people are going through. And, you know, he's a person of great empathy and warmth. I wish that more Americans could see him the way I do, in the quiet times and in the private times. What's on his mind? He cares deeply about what American people are going through.
Right, and another thing that he's been focusing on is potentially going after some of your incumbents, like Representative Thomas Massie. He's made critical comments of Brian Fitzpatrick, a district that you guys need to win. Is that helpful? Is that how he should be spending his energy when it comes to this midterm election?
Well, the president doesn't need my advice on how he should spend his energy. You know, again, I think big picture, he understands we have to hold the House. He's committed to helping me. You know, we meet regularly and talk about these races. He's made commitments to me about things he's going to do to help us this fall. You know, the President Trump is an incredible partner for us. He's going to be one of the reasons we hold the House. Frankly, we wouldn't have a House majority without President Trump. So I'm not concerned at all about it.
Okay. And just to talk about the map a little bit more broadly, you mentioned redistricting earlier. It does look like Republicans are going to come out on top this cycle, but 2028, Democrats are vowing to make more changes to the map. There's a group of your colleagues, bipartisan group, that are working to end mid-cycle redistricting. Is that an effort that you would support?
Well, I mean, I think we can all agree redistricting is a little out of hand. And it all started with an attorney named Mark Elias and with our former Attorney General, Eric Holder. They launched a project, over 10 years ago now, to try to win back seats they couldn't win through the ballot. And it's called Sue Till It's Blue. That's the nickname we gave it. But they've been, for this whole decade, they've gone into states like North Carolina and have been suing in state court trying to overturn legal maps enacted by legislatures, and they've been very successful. I mean, you know, I'm running for my 8th term, and this will, except for my first reelect, I had the same district. Ever since then, this will be the only time I've ever run in the same district twice, because every 2 years, Eric Holder is suing and winning in state court and throwing out legal maps. You know, the irony of it is, the judge 1 year will rule based on a principle, and then 2 years later they'll overturn another map and contradict the principle they used 2 years earlier. Like, so it's been a wild west. It's a game the Democrats have been playing the entire decade. I think it's about time Republicans got in the game. And frankly, if you look at the states that are being redistricted, like Texas, Florida, North Carolina, those are the 3 fastest growing states in the country. I think it makes sense to, you know, these districts have gotten out of whack because of people moving in. You know, there's a good argument that this redistricting is a positive thing in those states. But overall, I mean, you know, I don't think anybody loves what's happening, but for the Democrats to accuse us of doing something that they've been doing for a decade, makes me chuckle.
Okay, thank you, Congressman. That's all the time that we have. Really appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Kupor leads the Office of Personnel Management after helping build Andreessen Horowitz into one of Silicon Valley's most influential venture firms. Long focused on startups, AI, and the future of work, Kupor now oversees the federal workforce during a moment when the government is being pushed to modernize faster than ever. His perspective bridges tech disruption, institutional change, and the future of public service in America.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you to Director Kupor for being here with us to talk about tech, AI, the federal government, and the changes that we're seeing at OPM. The government is racing to adapt new technologies, but there's questions around talent, recruitment, and modernization. So let's kick off with a little bit of your background. You spent most of your career in Silicon Valley. How did you end up running the federal government's HR department?
It's a great question. My wife asked me that quite a bit. Look, at the end of the day, I think the reason why I'm here is what I learned in Silicon Valley, which is at the end of the day, we spend a lot of time talking about products and markets, as you probably know, on the tech side. But what I've learned over my 16 years now in the venture world is what really matters at the end of the day is the talent that you have, basically. We can have all kinds of theories on the market. At the end of the day, organizations are made up of people who ultimately, obviously, need objectives and incentives and mechanisms to make sure we can orient them around the things we need to do. And so this is a slightly different scale than I'm used to doing it, obviously, in the venture world. But to me, it's the same principle, whether you're in a startup company or a for-profit or you're in the government, which is the most important thing in my mind is, do you actually have the right seats, the right people in the right seats, and then do you actually have an incentive system, a set of objectives that ultimately drive the behavior you want? And that's what I hope to bring to the federal government.
And what sort of parallels have you drawn from startup world that have been sort of directly applicable to what you do at OPM now?
Yeah, one of it is that, which is, I think we try to overcomplicate things in some respects, and probably
government overcomplicate
exactly
things?
The government
Never.
Government does a very good job on that. But again, I think, and people say, well, the government doesn't do what we want them to do. Well, look, to me, these things are very simple, which is the question is, what incentive structure have you set up for people? So I'll give you a very simple example, which I think is a lesson that I learned from Silicon Valley. As you know, look, I come from the world where we take absolutely crazy amounts of risk, right? And nobody should freak out. I'm not proposing that the government does that. But what I think Silicon Valley does well is we think about kind of risks, and then we balance those risks with what we think the potential upside is. And what I've discovered in government, which is no surprise to anybody who's been here, is we basically created effectively a zero-risk culture because we have a compliance culture that basically overrides everything, right? We're worried about a GAO report or an OIG report or, God forbid, somebody gets hauled in front of Congress and has to answer to a committee.
Yeah.
And so as a result, if you think about the incentives we set up, we basically set up the incentives, which is thou shalt never take risk, which also therefore means we should never actually think innovatively or creatively about how to take upside opportunity. And so part of what I think we need and part of what I'm trying to introduce here is I've been using the term measured risk. And in Silicon Valley, we talk about permissionless innovation and permissionless risk. Here, I would call it permissioned risk and permissioned innovation, which is let's at least have the conversation about, okay, what's the downside that might happen here? And in some cases, obviously, look, if you're at the Department of War and we're talking about people losing their lives, okay, probably we should have very little tolerance for risk. But most of what many of us do in government does not involve the day-to-day of what somebody lives or dies, in which case we ought to have a slightly greater risk tolerance as long as we believe there's incredible upside opportunity. So some of that's a reorientation of thinking, of risk-taking, of incentive structures that I think is critical for the government.
And how has that attitude landed with federal employees that you interact with? Are they hesitant to sort of take on more risk than they're used to? What has that transformation been like?
Yeah, they've been hesitant, but when I ask them why they're hesitant, it always comes back to the same thing, which is, oh my God, if we do this, something bad will happen, right? We might get sued. When I first started, one of my teammates said, look, my number one job is to make sure, you never have to go in front of Congress and answer for some mistake. And I was like, look, I don't need you to do that. That's not why I'm here. I believe in the wisdom of Congress that, look, if we have a rational process for how we're making decisions, the answer is we're not going to score 100% on every test, and that's okay. So some of it, again, is like you've got to give people permission not to fail, and you know this from having covered Silicon Valley, right? There's this terrible meme that Silicon Valley loves failure, that we celebrate failure. Well, nobody wants to lose, but the reality is if you're going to take risk, then the likelihood of getting 100% on everything is not very high. And so part of it is just we have to give people permission that if you do something and you follow the process correctly and it turns out the outcome may not be what we desired, we can't fault people necessarily for the outcome as long as the process of getting there is actually very helpful.
And one of the things that we hear a lot about is how hard it is to get a government job.
Yes.
The process of, getting everything approved and through USA Jobs and the whole process, it can take years. So how have you tried to streamline that process? Are you using AI at all?
Hopefully it doesn't take years, but yes, it definitely is too hard. So we're trying to do a couple things. One is, yes, look, there is a role for AI. I don't think we're there yet in terms of like actually hiring people, right? But I think, look, we can use AI to do some basic summarization of resumes and stuff like that. That's helpful. What I really want to do, though, and we're working on building this, is we've had this model where you have to go search for all the jobs that are out there, and some of these terms mean nothing to you, right? You don't know what necessarily military preference means if you're not come from the government, or you certainly don't know what CTAP and ICTAP means, which if anybody here knows what that means, God bless you, you're an expert in HR.
Look where we are.
Exactly. We are in DC.
Yeah.
But, so look, the model that we want to get to is two things. One is we've got to find people where they are. So, I'll give you an example, in the early career side of things, we need to use platforms like Handshake, for example, which are like, kind of job platforms that college students are used to using. And those need to interface, well with USA Jobs so that we can obfuscate some of the complexity of USA Jobs and make it easy for people. And then secondly, what we have to do is we've got to do a better job, I would say, on the matching side. So one of my big frustrations is where you come into the government determines your success or failure, quite frankly. So if you find this job at HHS that you apply to, and it turns out for whatever reason, you're not a good fit for that HHS job, we essentially lose you as an applicant in the system, right? And so we're not doing a great job of, this is a terrible way of saying it, but of recycling talent where, just because you came in one door, you may be very qualified for a role at DOI or somewhere else. So we've got to do a better job of kind of doing that matching where, in the perfect world, what I want is you are, somebody who wants a job in the federal government, you tell us what your general interests are. Quite frankly, we should push to you the opportunities that we think are relevant. And if it turns out the first one isn't right, then great. We should push you to the second one, the third one. So we've got to make it just much more seamless for people. And we're making good progress there, but I'd say we certainly have ways to go.
And one of the things that OPM is tasked with is hiring more folks for both the tech and cyber forces.
Yep.
The recent AI executive order tasked OPM with helping bolster this hiring for cyber defenses in the wake of these really advanced AI models, sort of spooking the industry and government. So tell us a little bit about what you'll be doing there and how you're going to recruit cyber expertise for the government.
Yeah, so we're doing a couple things. One is, as you probably know, we've launched this program called Tech Force, which we launched a couple months ago. The goal of Tech Force is basically to get 1,000 kind of modern software developers, AI experts. And we had always contemplated cyber as a piece of that, but we didn't lead with cyber. We led with literally traditional kind of modern software development. Now, as part of the AI executive order, about 3 weeks ago, we launched our first cyber role. So we're going to market it through those same channels. I think of Tech Force, and we've been blessed to have lots of wonderful private company partners, some of whom are in the audience today. We're using kind of that leverage of the private sector to help us attract folks. So think of Tech Force as an outbound recruiting effort where we're going to go say, hey, if you are a cyber expert and you're interested in the government, come apply to this program. It's a 2-year program. In addition to obviously doing great work for the federal government, the goal is to help them augment their career. So part of the reason why we have private sector partners is we're going to do trainings and certifications and career development opportunities, and then ultimately culminate in a potential kind of job fair essentially, where people can kind of pick a public path or a private path. So part of this on the cyber side is just, what the EO does for us, which is super helpful, is it coalesces a lot of the demand in government. So one of the challenges, as you mentioned, why hiring is so hard is every agency is kind of doing their own thing, basically. And so the beauty of Tech Force and then the beauty of the EO is we now have a centralized kind of marketing message, which is, hey, we are the government, we're open for business on the cyber side. Tech Force will be the principal mechanism to draw in those individuals. We will do the screening, we'll do initial interviews for people, and then we will push to the agencies. here is a group of people who've passed all the various criteria that we've talked about. Now knock yourself out and just go pick from that list and bring them into your organization. So it's a much more efficient way of doing hiring.
And when you're talking to folks who might be interested in joining the tech force or working on cyber for the government, how do you get these really talented engineers, computer scientists, cyber experts, how do you get them excited to work for the government when they could, make a lot more money in the private sector?
Yeah, look, we're never going to solve that problem. So there are some things we can do, but look, we're never going to solve the problem that, look, yes, there's no question there will be a pay gap. So I think there's a couple things we got to do. One is we actually have to tell the story of what's cool about government. So
what's cool about government?
I think what's cool about government is you can work on the biggest, most complex problems that there are ever, basically, and do so just in an environment and a scale with a sense of national urgency and importance that you can't get in the private sector. And look, I come from the private sector. Obviously, the private sector is solving a lot of wonderful problems. But my goal, what I'm trying to convince people is, look, I'm not asking also for you to come and commit 40 years of your life to government. So this is, again, a problem I think that we've had is we've had this marketing message, which is come here and we basically will give you a 40-year career. And look, I'm obviously older than this age cohort, but I happen to have daughters in this age cohort. I don't believe anybody under the age of 30 today thinks in more than 2 or 3 year increments. You were telling me this is the longest place you've ever been, and it's 6 years. And that's awesome. That's great. But so we've got to stop this. That marketing narrative makes no sense to me. The narrative that I want to push is, look, come work on the most complex problems, advance your career, and then basically, if you decide to go to the private sector, God bless you, that's great. Let's help you go to the private sector. So we've got to have a greater tolerance for the idea that people might have shorter career stints.
Switching around.
Do so switching. And then, look, we got to do it on the other end, and we're doing this as well. We're working on a program with Jared Isaacman at NASA that we call NASA Force, interestingly. But, same thing, which is he's got a challenge where he's got mid-career gaps because a lot of his younger people go into industry, which is great and awesome. But this is another opportunity where we need to kind of do a better job of private sector managers and employers helping kind of do secondments and other ways to kind of fill gaps that we have that ultimately impact the ability of an organization like NASA to do the amazing things they're doing. So to me, this is a two-way street. And for too long, I think we've had this narrative, which is you're either a private sector person or you're a public sector person, and ne'er shall the two meet, basically. And I just think that's wrong. I don't think that's good for anybody. I think it's valuable for both organizations to have much more cross-fertilization.
And how do you keep the federal workforce motivated? I mean, we're at a time when there are massive job cuts to the federal workforce with DOGE and everything else, and we're also at a time when sometimes the federal workforce is demonized by this administration as being, partisan, even just career employees. So what's your message to employees these days to keep them motivated and happy in the federal workforce?
Yeah, look, I'm certainly not naive, and I recognize that not everybody agrees with all the things we're doing, and that's totally fine and totally fair. But what I've learned so far is the vast, vast majority of people come to the work every day at the federal government because they actually truly believe in doing public service. And more so what I've seen is they feel like they've been shackled in their ability to do new things or try new things. We were talking about innovation. It's never been part of the agenda. So look, we've got to go tell that positive message. And this is what I tell my team all the time is, look, yes, there is change, and I understand change is hard. I totally get that. And yes, there are, kind of jobs that we might have been doing that maybe the answer is those are less important in this administration than other things. And those are fair policy debates that we can all have. But at the end of the day, what we've got to do, I think most people come to work at the end of the day because they feel like they can do their best work. They work for a manager who cares about their career development. They're surrounded by smart people. They're held accountable to their work. We make sure there's accountability on their end. And so that's kind of what I would call the high-performance environment we're trying to engender here. And unfortunately, yes, that means that if we have people who aren't doing their jobs, yes, part of what we are doing is to make sure that it is easier ultimately to remove people who just, even despite, kind of challenges for managers, it shouldn't take 12 or 24 months to actually remove somebody from a job. And again, what I found is if you look survey after survey, most people believe that we don't do a great job of managing people on the low end, and we got to do a better job. And then on the high end, what we're trying to do is I want to enable greater differentiation. So as you probably know, for a long time we've had, great inflation essentially in the federal government where 70% of the people get ranked a 4 or 5 in the government, which just basically means they're performing above expectations. Mm-hmm. And we put in place rules which say we should cap that at 30%. Because I do believe there are some people who just knock the cover off the ball all the time, and we should reward them and disproportionately give them promotions and compensation. And then the reality is, the vast majority of the workforce, which is true of any organization, are people who show up every day, they do their job, they fulfill their objectives, and that's fine, and that's a good place to be. That is meeting expectations. And we've somehow demonized that meeting expectations is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. The reality is, look, that's what most people do. Most people, they have families, they have other interests, they come to work to get a paycheck in order to support their families or do other stuff. And that's totally fine. fine. And so we should recognize that and celebrate that. But for the people who truly go above and beyond and consistently outperform, they should be able to progress. They should get rewarded. They should get recognized for that performance.
And switching gears real quick, because we only have 40 seconds left,
Yep.
but what is the most useful way that you personally use AI for work?
Yeah, so I use it in a ton of ways. A lot of it, quite frankly, is just to get myself educated on things that I know nothing about, like learning about, the fun things like CTAP and ICTAP. So I spend a ton of time.
Very, very fun.
Yes,
thing.
very fun stuff. I spend a ton of time literally looking at legislation and asking Google to help me. We were over on the Hill the other day talking about this new AI legislation, that's being run, and I was like, great, this is a perfect use case for AI where I can get some basic summarization so that then I can find ways to dive deeper. So for me, that's probably the biggest opportunity still.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Director Kupor, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ashley. Appreciate it.
Dario Gil serves as the Undersecretary for Science at the Department of Energy, after years leading breakthrough research efforts at IBM. From AI to quantum computing to national security, he's shaped how technologies move from research labs to the real world. His work reflects the race to secure America's scientific edge as global competition intensifies and innovation reshapes the modern economy.
Me again. Thank you all for sticking with us this morning, and welcome Dario Gil to the Axios stage. One thing that we have learned covering AI here at Axios, the future belongs not just to the people working on the models and making them more sophisticated and more advanced, but the people building the infrastructure that powers all those models. So we're thrilled to have Dario Gil here today, who is leading the Genesis mission at the Department of Energy. Please describe to us in one sentence, what is your mission at DOE?
Well, I have two missions. Let me just say that
Okay,
first.
we can do two missions.
So I can explain Genesis mission, and then let me start with the Undersecretary for Science role. Under the Undersecretary for Science, the Department of Energy does three things, right? There's the energy component of the story that is more intuitive on the name around that. But there's a national security mission. The department runs the National Nuclear Security Administration, right, that designs, builds, and maintains the nuclear stockpile of the United States. And I am responsible as the Undersecretary for Science for the Office of Science, which is the nation's largest federal supporter of physical sciences research. But perhaps most importantly of it all is the Department of Energy runs the 17 national laboratories of the United States. So I spend a lot of my time, making sure that national laboratories are successful. So that's part one. The Genesis mission is a national effort that was signed as an executive order by the president the Monday of Thanksgiving of last year. And it is the flagship science and technology initiative of the administration. I run the Genesis mission on a day-to-day basis. And its simple thesis is that we're in the midst of a computing revolution that is going to transform the practice of science and engineering in America. And we seek to mobilize the best of the national labs, private sector, universities, and philanthropies to ultimately double the productivity and impact of America's $1 trillion a year R&D engine within a decade.
And can we just talk about the role AI plays in that? Is it that the AI is helping you do the work faster and more efficiently? Is it that nuclear is maybe helping power AI in new ways? Let's give some concrete examples of the everyday work.
Yeah, so the premise is that AI and technologies like quantum computing and high-performance computing are going to allow us to build a platform to accelerate discovery so that our scientists and engineers can accomplish the research exploration and the discovery mission faster. Let me give just one famous example. If you look at proteins, right, in biology, proteins are the building blocks of life. In 1971, there was an effort that got started at Brookhaven National Laboratory to create what is known as a protein data bank. And what they did is they used one of our synchrotrons, right, basically it's a light source, and illuminates X-rays, and you prepare a sample of these proteins. And once the X-rays hits, they form the three-dimensional, it forms a diffraction pattern, and you reconstruct the three-dimensional structure of the proteins. So there were 7 proteins in 1971. It took 50 years of effort of the scientific community to create a structure, a bank of 200,000 proteins. Then came modern AI. And with AlphaFold, the Google DeepMind team, leveraging the scientific infrastructure that had been created over decades, we went from 200,000 proteins in 50 years to 200 million in 2 years. So that's an example of accelerating science. And when we seek to do this, is across all fields of science, in biology, in chemistry, mathematics, in physics, in engineering. And ultimately, we have also then created a portfolio of national challenges. In energy, how do we get to fusion faster? How do we accelerate the development and deployment of nuclear energy? How do we modernize the grid, right, as we do expansion? In discovery science, how do we engineer new classes of materials, right, to advance progress in our economy and national security? So we have 26 national challenges. So the combination of building a platform to accelerate discovery and then solving problems that we really care about is the dual track of the Genesis mission.
And are these pretty long-term goals to be done over the course of maybe a couple of administrations, or do you have any major goals that you hope to accomplish, like by the end of Trump's term?
Oh, it's both. We have many goals where we are delivering both the infrastructure, building AI supercomputers. We have goals about building fault-tolerant quantum computers. We have goals in taking AI beyond language and coding into this realm of chemistry and biology and physics. So those are infrastructure goals. We definitely have goals on doing extensive demonstrations a la AlphaFold, but think about dozens of examples of that across many fields. But ultimately also needs to be enduring. So I'm very actively engaged with Congress in a bipartisan fashion, and we would like to see also enduring legislation, bipartisan legislation that also allows us to carry out this mission well beyond the current administration.
And does that have to do with funding or letting you guys hire more people? What exactly do you need to see in statute?
Well, I think it should reflect these priorities of what is the infrastructure that we should build for the United States scientific ecosystem. I mean, one analogy I give is that just like building telescopes allowed us to see what's far away and microscopes what's small, modern AI systems and quantum systems allow us to see what's very complex. So, and we couldn't ask our astronomers to, be at the leading edge if we didn't give them telescopes. So we need to make sure that the university ecosystem or national laboratories have world-class AI and AI supercomputers for science. And we have fault-tolerant quantum computers for science. So infrastructure is an element. Another element would be ensuring that we have a coordinated national science and technology strategy in terms of a portfolio of grand challenges we want to solve as a country. And then the third element of that legislation should be about education and training. How will we educate the next generation of Americans in science and technology in the age of AI?
And in this new age of technology and AI, how are you thinking about traditional paths of education and whether college is still necessary to sort of train people to work on these big problems you're trying to solve?
It's an and. I'm very passionate about that aspect of it, that there are many avenues, obviously, to participate in the frontier of science and technology, right? But yes, I do very strongly believe that we need to continue to educate both in college and in grad school, generations of American scientists and engineers, and I think that's really, really important, and that we double down on that too.
And what are some of the major challenges to seeing through these goals? You did talk about legislation and funding, but we just talked to Director Kupor. The government is bureaucratic, and there can be challenges to seeing things through. So what are some sort of unexpected areas of friction that you have encountered in trying to carry out the Genesis mission?
Look, we're trying to do something very ambitious, right? A national effort where you're mobilizing the capabilities of the federal government and states and the private sector and so on requires a lot of coordination. I think the most important thing we're focused is to move with the speed that is commensurate with the technological revolution that is unfolding. We just cannot simply just say, well, we're going to take our merry time and 10 years from now we'll build our first AI supercomputer for science. It's just too slow. So I think that is one element of it that is challenging. But one positive thing that I would love to share with all of you is also the strengths that we have. And the national laboratories are something that every American should be so proud of. I often remark, there's this famous statement with Ken Burns about the national parks being America's best idea. Yeah. Well, I would argue that the national lab should be sort of in that pantheon, right? And
someone tell Ken Burns.
Yeah, we should tell him. And what it is very interesting is that when they were created with a lot more flexibility. And because most of them allows us to contract them, and they are through contractors, the majority. It allows us greater flexibility in attracting scientists. We can offer more flexible pay, better conditions and so on. So the creativity with which earlier generations of Americans envision ways to actually advance the national mission through science continues to pay dividends to today. Today, what we have to do is leverage those strengths, but also find easier ways to partner with the private sector and with our universities and philanthropies to tackle big goals.
So the DOE has announced quite a few partnerships with the private sector, with AI companies, both closed models and open models. Recently, you introduced a partnership with Reflection, which is an open model in the US. They're aiming to be sort of America's DeepSeek, the leading open model. So can you talk about why you've partnered with both types of companies and the purposes they serve for the government in different ways?
We partner very broadly. In fact, we have at present, I think, 37 or 38 institutional partners as part of the Genesis Consortium. But specifically, insofar as models are concerned, we have partnership with all the leading frontier proprietary model companies, but also with the open source American companies. And look, open source is a fundamental aspect of not only the frontier of AI, but of the overall ecosystem. And the United States needs to be able to lead on both, the proprietary and the open source. But the reality of it is that if you look at model usage, particularly in the open source around that, we have seen this explosion of growth of Chinese models around that. So it is imperative that we also see a variety of leading-edge American open source, open weight models being pushed, and we want to be able to incentivize it. I would also argue that for science in particular, science very often is an open endeavor, right, that requires transparency and the scientists to understand, not only how the model was built and trained, but how do we customize it, and how do we actually make that model effort that has been customized for science the asset of the community, so they're invested in its creation. So it is particularly important that we have American open source, open weight models for science, and we're partnering broadly with the new ventures that are pursuing that, as well as established companies like NVIDIA has a very active open source effort as well, and open weight, and we're partnering with them as well.
And we're running out of time, but I think for a lot of Americans, I talk to people, I talk to voters, people are worried about AI because they think about chatbots, they think about data centers, they think about maybe anxiety over work, the effect on creativity, but you're really focused on like the hard use cases of AI that are behind the scenes that are going to apply to practical life. So what's your closing message to people who are a little wary about this technology?
Well, first, that I understand the wariness. I myself, and I've been in this field for quite a long time, don't like how my community has spoken about AI. And I've been openly critical about that aspect of it. And one of the things I'm most passionate about in the Genesis mission is that it's purpose-driven. It's not like AI for what? What problems are we trying to solve? So when we focus on, look, do we want to see fusion happen? Right? Imagine that possibility. Here are the mechanisms in which we can accelerate the time to a credible fusion future and fusion power plant, or personalized medicine, or what we're doing with materials. So a very purpose-driven element is the right way to talk about AI, to bring forth the scientists who have that sparkle in their eye and says, this is what I'm trying to solve. This is what I care about. And AI is a very powerful tool. Is the analogy of the microscope or the telescope is incredible around that, but it has to be a future of optimism, not because we're trying to sell a kind of good, but because we're going to solve problems that people care about. So I think that pivot is fundamental. and this sort of dystopian future that some of my colleagues are presenting around that. They're very good at technology. They're terrible communicators.
And on that note, since we're here at an Axios event where we try to be really good communicators, I'm going to tell you that we're out of time. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcoming back to the stage, Mike Allen.
Great job. Good morning. Thank you for these great conversations. Welcome to the first Axios AM Live. Axios is always worthy of your time, and one of the most important conversations right now is how companies engage with the government on these humanity-changing technologies. We thank our partner Anthropic for making today's conversations possible, for bringing Axios AM to life. Our next guest is the head of North American Government Affairs at Anthropic, has worked for almost 30 years at the intersection of technology and policy, spent time in Texas, is the pride of Seattle, so bilingual. Brian Peters, welcome to Axios. Brian, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate you. You are Claude-pilled.
Very much so.
So are we. Appreciate being able to dig into that. Anthropic's been having meteoric growth that you've seen on Axios, and you live it. Could you tell us a little bit about how Anthropic is different? Anthropic behind the headlines.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I'm really excited to be here for your first live event with the audience. You're right. Anthropic is abnormal. Abnormal. There will be a lot of stories about us. They'll look like the typical tech story, revenue, growth, all of that. But in reality, if people see just that, they'll miss the story. We're an organization with a very clear mission, and that is to help humanity get through the AI transition as safely as we possibly can so that we can get to the benefits. Oftentimes, I tell people that working for Anthropic is a lot like working for a nonprofit, whereas historically, my roles have involved looking out for corporate risk. At Anthropic, I get to look out for human risk. And so in my role, I work with our team here in DC and our team across the country. We're growing in Canada and Mexico. And the thing that we try to do with policymakers is keep them along with us, keep them on the exponential. We talk about the exponential a lot. Things are moving really fast. This technology is very powerful, and it is increasing in power very, very quickly. Fast, fast, fast. When we work with policymakers, we encourage people to think about doing something in a matter of months, not years.
And something that Axios and Anthropic share is just chatting with you behind the scenes. I feel a sense of urgency.
Indeed. Indeed. It wakes us up every day. Or maybe rather, we should say it keeps us up at night. And this is something that I've come to believe deeply, personally myself. And when I speak with researchers at Anthropic and people who have been thinking about this for many years, it really does drive us. It really is important for everybody to think about what we need to do in the next few months versus the next few years.
Brian, take us behind the curtain. You spend a lot of time with Congress, a lot of time at the White House, a lot of time in Canada. What should the administration and Congress be focused on at this moment?
Well, number one, I already mentioned it, urgency. Number two, oversight. We've long advocated for some form of guardrails on the frontier AI model developers, the biggest companies doing the most powerful models, not startups, not other types of companies. And really, we think about a frame that is probably a little bit like autos. We check autos to make sure they're safe, and if there's a problem, we do something about it. A similar regime like what we have at NHTSA would make a lot of sense for frontier AI model development. So we talk a lot in Congress. We've been working with the administration. I think there's going to be a lot more to come here at the federal level. We've been very active in the states, and I'll commend the states for taking action where Washington, D.C. has been a little bit slow. I think there's a real shift now, and we're going to be digging into this a lot. We'll have a proposal that I think tries to raise the bar, and that'll be coming out very soon, and we're looking forward to it.
And You know the art of the possible. What's something Anthropic would want and has been pushing that could be done in this climate, that could be done with this Congress, this White House?
I think this year we're going to hopefully see a good amount of legislative debate. I think there's already a strong bipartisan interest in funding the U.S. AI Safety Institute, U.S. CASE, and we're fully behind that. And like I said, we're going to be coming out with a proposal, and we're excited to really get into this debate more fully at the federal level.
So there's been a ton of coverage on Axios and elsewhere about Mythos, your very powerful model with cyber bio capabilities that some officials worry could pose a risk to critical infrastructure. You've formed Project Glasswing to exchange best practices among our cyber defenders. Tell us what's really going on with Mythos. And by the way, that is the correct way to pronounce it. I verified it with the top.
Yeah, Mythos.
Yes.
Some people say Mythos and some Mythos, and that's definitely not correct.
Okay.
So this is the Mythos moment that a lot of people have been talking about. We've certainly been living it. For folks who aren't aware, Mythos is a very, very powerful model. And like we've said, powerful technology requires a responsible approach. So in this case, looking at its capabilities to do very bad things in the cyberspace, we decided not to release it and instead work with a select group of partners, those kinds of organizations that cover large code bases. So things like operating systems, browsers, the software platforms that run our key critical infrastructure, like the power grid, water systems, banks, and work with those partners to make sure that they have a head start. These cyber defenders need to have that head start because similarly powerful models are going to come from other places in 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, a head start against the cyber offenders, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So we have to stay ahead of the bad guys, and that's what this is all about. Now, how you expand access and make sure that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands is a very deliberate process that we're engaged with the U.S. government to do as well as we can. We're working with our Five Eye partners and many other private sector stakeholders around the world to continue expanding access. Just to give you one example, and this is not cyber speak that I can't really speak to at all, but some of our partners who have been in this space for decades have told us stories like, my team has been working around the clock. They've never worked this hard in their entire career, just to give you some sense of what's going on. And again, why does it matter? We're talking about the power grid. We're talking about our banks. We're talking about the devices in your pockets where you have a lot of sensitive personal information.
Brian, the water you swim in, how AI policy is received across the country. How big an issue do you think AI will be in the midterms this year and in 2028?
I think it's going to be an issue. I think it's going to be quite an issue. We do a lot of our own polling and research, and what we see is that it's not really breaking into the top 10 set of issues when you ask voters what they care about, but when you ask them about AI, they have a lot of views, they have a lot of concerns. This is, if you think about it as a kitchen table conversation, it's kids and safety, and it's jobs. Our polling suggests that 74% of Americans want to see an AI safety rule on the books. And on the jobs point, Gen Z says, 81% of Gen Z says that they're very fearful about their job prospects. This is a flip because historically, younger generations were much more optimistic about the future, so there's something going on here, and I experienced this in my own life. I have a son who's 15. He just finished his freshman year. He's been working really hard, studying. I'm very proud of him. But he asked me, Dad, what am I going to do? What kind of job should I think about getting? He even says, should I even keep studying? This is really hard. And I said, of course you should keep studying.
But wait, what do you tell him? What should he study?
So I'm honest with him. I tell him I don't know. And he goes, well, Dad, you work at an AI company. You're supposed to have answers for this. And what I do tell him is the human part of what we do together and what you do is what's going to matter. I tell him to be a good person. I tell him to work on his collaboration skills, to be a good teammate, to be a good leader. That's the thing that is showing up in our data. The way people use Claude is people shift to that type of work. And maybe to bring it back to the point about voters, people ask us to predict what's going to happen all the time. Voters don't want us to predict what's going to happen. They want us to take responsibility for it.
And Brian, our last question before our one fun thing, just talking a little bit about the benefits of AI and looking ahead to the degree that you can show any leg for us? Like, what should we be watching for, and how can it benefit our audience here and around the world?
Well, I'll give you one tangible example. So we work with the Epilepsy Foundation. They built an app called Sage. Because imagine a family who just had a child diagnosed with epilepsy. They're up late at night, a new episode, they're trying to figure out what to do. Maybe they should call the doctor, can't get a hold of the doctor, go to the hospital. The Epilepsy Foundation worked with Claude to build an app that digested 25,000 documents in the epilepsy community, and now that assistant gives those families the information they need. That's really tangible right now. I think that's a great benefit. Personally, for myself, my father passed away when I was 11, and he had cancer. I am very, very optimistic based on what I'm seeing internally and externally, watching this every day, that we're going to see real scientific breakthroughs in medicine and biology in just the next few years. So I have a colleague right now going through something like this, and when I see it, I'm very, very hopeful that we're going to solve some of those biggest challenges.
Thank you for sharing that and that encouragement. Just in the spirit of what's next, what should we be looking for? What can you give us a hint about?
I think we're going to see a lot of discoveries in biology. Biology is so complex. Our CEO, Dario Gil, was a neuroscientist before this. And one of the reasons he shifted his work to machine learning and AI was because doing it the old human way was too slow, it was too complex. And that's why he shifted, and I think that's really what's going to happen. Is my aha moment was about 10 years ago when I was working with DeepMind, and they announced AlphaFold, the way these proteins fold, a lot of implications for how medicines work in the body. That's something that humans couldn't do. And this is the shift we're making, so I'm very optimistic about it.
Brian, your drop the mic moment, one fun thing. Your mother-in-law has found a clever use for Claude.
Yes, we were talking a little bit about this earlier. So last fall, my mother-in-law had never worked with an AI assistant. I said, you got to try Claude. And she was having a little bit of a hard time with it. And we said, finally, what's something that's really challenging you're trying to do right now? And she said, I'm planning my trip down Route 66 with my friends. So of course we started planning the trip. And I think all of us, at least me as a normie, we use the technology to plan trips. But she has very special dietary needs. And so finding the right places to eat to cover that challenge was really, really hard. Claude helped her do it. So she's in town this week. And I talked to her on Sunday. I said, hey, how's the trip? She says, Brian, it was amazing. I said, well, what about the food? She says, the best part, we got off the beaten path, and we found all these great places to eat, and people were so nice and so supportive. Everybody was wonderful until we got to California, which is where she's from.
Claude for the win, mother-in-law for the win. We thank our partners at Anthropic for these conversations across the country. Our conversations with Anthropic are going to continue for this series. Check out axios.com/events. You'll see what's coming. And Brian Peters, thanks for a great conversation. Appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Muriel Bowser has led Washington, D.C. through moments of historic change, from economic growth and political unrest to the post-pandemic transformation of downtown. As mayor of the nation's capital, she's navigating how cities compete for talent, rebuild trust, and adapt to new ways of living and working. Bowser's leadership reflects the pressures reshaping urban America as local leaders confront rapid political, cultural, and economic change.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Cuneyt Dil with Axios DC. Mayor Bowser, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cuneyt.
You have been mayor for almost 12 years now.
Yes.
Fully there.
Yes.
And this new chapter that you're looking forward to, we're going to talk about that for sure, too.
Sure.
But starting off sort of with the news of this era, DC's economy, let's say, needs some juice, needs some forward thinking. You advised the next mayor of DC to really be, quote, conservative, prudent, and in the fiscal management of the city to follow those sort of more moderate principles, I think, at the Washington Post recently.
Yeah.
The next mayor could be a democratic socialist. What do you think of the way the race is going with a week to go?
Well, just like all Washingtonians, I hope I'll be voting, and I'll be voting for the things that I think are important for the city and for my own family. So it is a new type of election for us, and that is ranked choice voting. It's an election that will see a mayor change, 7 council, potential for a lot of change. Let me just put it that way. And just today, I was organizing all the literature on my, entry table. And I put everything to the side so I could read through it. There are actually people, as long as I've been involved in DC politics, that are on the ballot that I don't know who they are. And so I want to spend some time making informed choices.
But what do you think of that? Like, someone could come into office with a sort of very different philosophy about growing the economy or managing the fiscal health of the city. What do you think, are you worried about that? Are you worried about Councilmember Janice Lewis-George, who is a Democratic Socialist, winning?
What I will be focused on, and I want everybody to think about, is we're really not that long away from being governed by a control board. And what got us there was imprudent decisions fiscally. So we had to work out of that. We had the assistance of the federal government in bailing out some of our institutions, and we never want to go back there. And so what I think is important is when I look at the whole council, I recognize that none of them, except Phil, I think may be the last one, who served even during a recession.
Council Chairman Phil Mendelson.
Yes, Council Chairman Mendelson served during a recession. And in most of my tenure, I have led really rapid growth in the district, over 6% year over year, except in the post-COVID years. And now we are growing at a rate less than inflation. So that necessitates different thinking. It necessitates how we invest our dollars in a slow growth period and how we get back to faster growth.
Why is it so hard for DC to attract new industries? Like we've talked about in the region for a long time, diversifying the economy for as long as anyone can remember. Why is it so difficult, you think, having been mayor now? You've tried, presumably, of course. What do you think? We have to be consistently a better business climate. Industry comes to our region, but they're going to Virginia more than they're going to DC and Maryland. So we have to be consistently better with our rules and regulations, with how we change the rules and regulations, and we have to be more competitive with taxes. Taxes?
Yes.
If you could wave a wand, what would you want to do for taxes to improve the business climate?
I would want to be very comparable to the region. We're different than a lot of places in that cities that people like to compare us to, because people can easily move not just cities, but can move states very easily and have similar advantages to the district. Now, there's only one DC, and so we're not going to compete on some things with other jurisdictions. But we're always going to be the nation's capital. We're always going to be the seat of the federal government, though to a lesser extent will we have federal employees. But we need to be competitive with the region.
What do you think are the growth areas that the next mayor should look for?
Well, we've leaned heavily, as you know, into sports and entertainment. So I'm very proud that in my tenure, we've been able to make almost $1 billion investment in the Cap One Arena. We'll have about almost a $4 billion investment in bringing a new stadium and a new neighborhood to RFK. And I think the next frontier, well, a couple things, is what's going to happen in Southwest with the federal government shifting their portfolio, and how we continue to take advantage of changing our downtown so it's not so heavily commercial, but it's more residential. And we're leading the nation per capita in converting underutilized office space into residential. So I think that is going to continue in right-sizing our affordable housing portfolios and market.
Speaking of that, since you mentioned it, there's coverage now that how difficult it is to build housing in DC because of market forces and because of sort of the workforce cuts to the federal government. What will it take?
That's not the reason.
What's the reason?
The reason is we've built affordable housing in DC throughout my tenure, more per capita than any jurisdiction in America, 62,000 units over the last 11 years. And we have had a very stable investment in our housing production trust fund. We, unfortunately, in this city, the policy environment changed after COVID, and there was an unwillingness to go back to the pre-COVID rules for too long. And so what we are really experiencing in the district is a rent payment crisis, which has chased capital out.
Which means people are not able to pay their rent.
People are not paying their rent. And that's I'm making a different statement than you.
Yeah.
And so we have to get back to the rules. People are paying, they paid their rent before the pandemic, they're paying their rent in Maryland, they're paying their rent in Virginia, but our policies did not require that for too long. And so we have to, we've done some work with the council to change the laws back to pre-pandemic laws. And I think there's more work to do there, but we have to get back to Capitol saying DC is a great place to invest.
Shifting gears a little bit, a big legacy item, I think, for your mayoralty has been handling President Trump. The first time, the second time now. When he won his second, sort of, the second time, how did you devise your strategy for dealing with this incoming administration?
Our strategy, I think, was similar to my approach in other cases. So I have served now 4 presidential administrations, served with 4 presidential administrations, 2 Trumps, and every iteration that you can have in the Congress. And so our approach is always the same. Introduce ourselves, who we are, what we do, make sure that people know we take care of ourselves. Believe it or not, there are people who still think that we're wards of the federal government and they pay all our bills. That's not the case. We're a $21 billion organization, 700,000 people, and for all intents and purposes, we are a state. The mayor functions as the governor, the county executive, the congressperson in some cases, and the 2 senators in other cases. So the mayor has a big job to move the agenda for the city. So that's always been my approach. It was my approach in the first Trump. I was the second mayor, I think, to go up to Trump Tower. To have that conversation. I went to Mar-a-Lago to have that conversation. And our focus is always how do we protect and defend home rule for the District of Columbia, and how do we work on the things that are of shared interest.
I want to ask what you talked about with the president, but what was in your head going into that meeting? Like, what were you thinking? Like, how do you strategize for that kind of a...
What was in my head was that we needed to get him to neutralize his antagonism against the district.
Because before he won, he kept saying he wants to take over DC repeatedly over the campaign trail. That was the atmosphere.
Absolutely.
That you were...
And so I felt strongly that if we could neutralize him, we could get to the other side of...
And how did you?
Just constant talking, I think. And in the first time I met with Trump, he was then the president-elect for the first time, I realized that he didn't know that much about DC. He viewed DC from the lens of a real estate developer. And so that's how we talked. When he came back, I think he realized how much influence he can have in DC. And that could be a backdrop for any number of conversations he has around the country.
Looking at now, through January, you said you would run through the tape as you end your 3rd term. What does that look like now through January?
Well, the year has been somewhat typical in that there's a calendar that we follow, especially related to the budget, which occupies much of the first half of the year. And the second half of the year is finishing and big projects, things that remain stuck that we want to shake loose and harden. I could say harden the things that have to get accomplished by the next mayor, including delivering RFK by 2030.
There's sort of worry in a mayoral term coming to an end, a power vacuum, things not getting, people are waiting for agency heads to potentially change, and that kind of a thing. How do you still, go full speed instead of just going through the motions?
Well, that's an important question, and it's one that we haven't really dealt with in the city in a long time. And I think that for some people, they've never gone through a mayoral transition. And so it is important that we are able to support our agency directors, make sure our agency directors are treated respectfully. They have important jobs. We want them to be able to serve all of the people that work for them. What would really be lovely is if our employees don't even feel a transition, because that way we think our residents aren't feeling it. So our job is to do the political work from my office and let our employees do their jobs.
Okay, speed round, we have to wrap up in a moment, but you said if you like Kenyon McDuffie, who was running for mayor last year, if you like how you've been mayor, you would love Kenyon McDuffie, who is running for mayor now. Is that still true?
Well, I don't know if I said that exactly.
You winked, I believe, as well. That was the quote, I think, no? Was that wrong?
I don't think so.
Do you support him for mayor?
I support Kenyon McDuffie, and I have always supported Kenyon McDuffie. And I think that I'm not endorsing or making any endorsements of mayor because I'm stepping off the political stage.
Will people remember you as the mayor who brought back football to DC?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Before we get going, I do want to remind everyone, we have a coffee shop powered by Anthropic. It is open throughout the morning. There's additional seating, there's a Claude typewriter, there's an interactive economic index station, and a live stream of the program as well. And before we continue today, mark your calendars, please. Axios House is coming to DC July 13th through 15th. We are going to be convening about American power, innovation, industry, and leadership. You don't want to miss it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor Bowser.
Thank you.
Representative Adriano Espaillat is chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and one of Congress's leading voices on immigration and economic opportunity in American cities. As AI transforms industry and reshapes the workforce, he's been at the forefront of conversations ensuring innovation creates opportunity for all communities. Espaillat offers a critical perspective on how policymakers are balancing technological change, economic mobility, and public trust in America.
Congressman, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I want to start off with AI. You're the author of several AI bills. Many more have been introduced by your colleagues, but basically nothing sweeping or even minor has been passed by Congress to regulate AI at this point. In fact, the federal government is trying to roll back AI regulations on the state level. What do you say to Americans who are fearful about the harmful effects of AI and worried that Congress simply isn't up to the task of putting guardrails on this rapidly growing technology?
The politics should not get in the way of regulating it. We must be up to the task to ensure that we move with the rest of the world and that we facilitate the development of AI with guardrails that are responsible for our communities. That's why my AI Literacy Act is so important, because communities like the one that I represent, Harlem, Washington Heights, the Bronx, have been left behind. They're still trying to catch up with the digital divide. Imagine if this process moved by swiftly and quickly, leaves them 1,000 years behind. So we must be responsible in setting the guardrails so that it's not a very negative revolution. And we must ensure that it's democratized, that it goes to every neighborhood, senior centers, after-school programs, churches, everywhere, small businesses. And also we must think regionally. I've also introduced legislation that calls for a hemispheric strategy towards AI. We shouldn't forget that we share the hemisphere with places like Chile, Brazil, Uruguay, who are moving very quickly, fast forward, with regards to AI. And we must be the leaders. America must be the leader in developing a strategy for the entire hemisphere.
Procedurally, though, do you see any prospect for bipartisan cooperation on this front?
There should be a bipartisan effort. I don't see why that should not be the case. This is something that we cannot ignore. It is happening, and we must find the political will to reach across the aisle and make sure that we do this responsibly, that it's not something that will really devastate the job situation in our communities. We just saw the mayor talk about rent and how people are not making rent. These are real life situations facing millions of Americans across the country. Affordability, rent, food prices, food security. These are realities of America that must be dealt with. And if we're going to have this transformational revolution with AI, we must make sure that people are not displaced and perhaps even find themselves in a worse condition to begin with.
One of the specific examples I'm thinking of is you introduced a bill in 2023 to prohibit the use of AI to impersonate political candidates in terms of their voice, their image.
That's correct.
This election, when that was introduced, it wasn't really a problem, but this election cycle, I've been following the midterm ads very closely, and there are ads that depict your colleagues, that depict candidates running for the House in all kinds of compromising situations that are completely fabricated by AI with no disclosure, because the disclosure isn't even a disclosure of that use, let alone the impersonation, isn't required by the law. So I'm wondering, on that particular front, is that something you're going to try to prioritize? Are there any Republican colleagues that you've spoken to about trying to get something passed on that, maybe attached in a larger legislative vehicle?
That was very early on, right?
Yeah.
Now we've seen it in real time, how it's impacting. Absolutely. I think, first of all, there should be a disclosure. No question about it. There should be a disclosure. And then, of course, there should be some ground rules, just like there is right now with any political advertisement. You have to disclose who's putting the advertisement out there. There must be some level of accountability as to what's being fed to the public.
Obviously, AI is becoming, as you mentioned, it is becoming increasingly pertinent on the ground level, in politics, at the local level. Obviously less relevant to Upper Manhattan and the Bronx, but data centers are a big issue for people where they're trying to build data centers, and it's been a hugely motivating and mobilizing issue for voters. I'm wondering if you think this is something that Democrats should try to harness in this cycle, in the 2028 cycle, just in terms of grassroots frustration with the speed of the development and, I guess, the concern about what it'll do to their communities.
There must be some local participation in these data centers. You just can't set them out there without any kind of oversight. For example, energy costs are real right now. I met with a group of barbershop owners and beauty salon owners, and the cost of doing business for them are several things. You know, it's energy costs, water, and the products that they use. And by far, their energy costs are really high. So how are these data centers going to impact the cost of energy across cities in America, across jurisdictions in America where they're trying to set them up? So I think these are real questions that must be answered, the impact that they have on local communities with regards to energy costs and other matters that are so relevant and important to the communities that we represent.
I want to move on to immigration. Obviously, a very relevant topic for you as the Hispanic Caucus chair. The House is going to vote this week on $70 billion for ICE and CBP. That's on top of $170 billion passed last year as part of the big, beautiful bill. I'm wondering if Democrats take the majority next September when appropriations comes up. Is rescinding that funding going to be a top priority for you personally as a senior appropriator and for House Democrats more broadly? And is it something that, if it comes to it, should be an issue for which you guys are willing to let the government shut down?
Budgets are, a budget is an exercise of priorities and values that you have as a representative. Where you put the money matters. And so this reconciliation bill that's before us, maybe even today, has $70 billion in addition to what was already given, the 170 plus that was given to ICE before. Potentially this could fund ICE for the next 10 years. Just for you to get a grasp of how large this is, the New York City budget last year was $55 billion. So we're putting ICE on steroids, right? Without no provisions in the bill to hold them accountable. There is no sensitive locations provision in there. That's my bill, which calls on ICE not to raid a church, a school, a hospital, an emergency room in a hospital. No body camera provision in it. Certainly not a provision in it to unmask ICE. They will continue to be, the agents will continue to be anonymous. They'll knock on your door. You won't know their first name, their last name. No one is going to open their doors to an anonymous person. And so this is really abrasive because the money came from somewhere. Money doesn't fall from the sky. It doesn't fall from a tree. It must come from somewhere. And as an appropriator, we make decisions every day. And these are the values that we have of where the money should be. And money came from Medicaid. Money came from SNAP. Money came from Medicare, from housing. These are important areas that must be funded. And I think that we should rescind and claw back some of those, lots of that money. Some people say that it may only take $15 billion for ICE to run, and yet we gave them a ton of money in the first bill, in the big ugly bill, and now we're attempting, the Republicans are attempting to give them another $70 billion.
In terms of how that would get done, obviously, if you guys were in the House majority, the Senate still, regardless, has to have 60 votes, so it'd have to be a bipartisan. But you guys would have the leverage to say, unless we unify as a party around these bills, they're not going to pass. So should House Democrats put their foot down and say, we're not going to pass any appropriations bill that doesn't pull back X amount of this extra funding for immigration enforcement?
Well, I hope that in a majority, it'll be a healthy majority where we will be able to do this. But the immigration debate has shifted. Whereas maybe a year or two ago, it was taboo and people felt that we shouldn't talk about it. Trump used it and weaponized it, and it drove them right to the White House, and people felt like we did not have the upper hand with regards to the immigration debate. That the opinions of the American people have now shifted and are very favorable towards it. I think the American people know that we should not be giving all this money to ICE and taking it away from Medicaid. I have 488,000 of my constituents that are Medicaid recipients. And that cut has not kicked in yet. It will soon. And it will compromise their health care. So I think the American people understand that. I think dreamers are an aspect of immigration that polls well and the American people support. Farm workers, many of whom are not showing up to work because they feel they're going to get arrested and deported. And then keeping families together. Those three silos, if you may, I think the American people understand, and they're now very supportive of. So we have the moral high ground on this debate now. The question is, will we have a strong enough majority to do this this coming year?
I want to move on to politics, but we still have time. You are facing what has been widely regarded as a pretty serious primary challenge. I'm curious, how concerned are you about your primary?
I get a primary every 2 years, even when I don't.
And New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani has endorsed your challenger. Can you tell us what your relationship is like with him?
Well, that was his decision. We're grown-ups in this, and I respect his decision. My task is to talk to the voters that I represent in Harlem, in Washington Heights. I do that both in English and in Spanish, and I'm able to get my message across as to what my priorities are for the folks that I represent. And the priorities in Harlem and Washington Heights, in the Northwest Bronx, which is a very working class neighborhood, is how do we lift people up? How do we make things easier for them? How do we help them ensure that they can make rent, that their kids have a high quality education so they can move forward? How do they have access to health care? We have a bunch of hospitals in the district. How do they get those jobs and good contracts? The nurses just had a strike. I stood by them. Why? Because nurses are there with you. They spend more time with your grandfather, your grandmother when they're sick in bed than the actual doctor. They're there when they have a fever. They're there when it's a crisis situation, when they have a seizure. They call the doctor. And so they should get paid a good salary and good benefits. And so that's the goals that I have for the constituents that I represent. And that's what I'm talking about. The mayor could have his decision, that's his choice, and we'll let the chips fall where they may on election day.
Lastly, Israel has been a big topic that your opponent's been bringing up a lot. Obviously, AIPAC, their brand has become completely toxic in the Democratic primary electorate. So I just want to ask you directly, would you reject AIPAC spending on your behalf?
I think the most important thing with regards to campaign funding is that we must reform campaign financing at the federal level, and that money should be taken out of politics at the federal level. And then you have two.
I do want to ask you that there's a group, Bold America PAC, that spent $1.3 million on your behalf, by far the largest spender in the 13th district. Are you concerned about what the source of that money might be?
Well, my opponent has gotten money from an ICE contractor as she goes around campaigning supposedly on behalf of immigrants. She is receiving money from a Texas billionaire who funded Greg Abbott, the same guy that sent buses full of immigrants to cities across the country. So we gotta have campaign finance reform. And that includes ending Citizens United, because as long as we have Citizens United, you'll have an unlimited amount of money coming in from a bunch of places that will impact the election. And I've been endorsed by the movement called End Citizens United. New York City has campaign finance reform. I think it's a good thing, and I will be a strong supporter of it.
Gotcha. All right, last question. Nixon 5?
Well, I thought it was going to be 4, but now 5. Yes.
All right, Congressman, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Sarah Youngwood and David Ripley offer distinct perspectives on AI in a new era of financial innovation. As CFO of Nasdaq, Sarah Youngwood helps navigate AI-driven shifts in global markets and investor trust. As CEO of Kraken, David Ripley leads one of the world's largest crypto platforms at the intersection of digital assets and mainstream markets. Together, they offer a unique view into the future of finance.
So, there is something really remarkable happening in financial markets, and if you blink, you might miss it. There's AI, there's prediction markets, there's stablecoins, there's tokenized assets, there's this concept of always-on trading, and we're going to talk about all of these things. But here's the through line I want to put out there for the audience. The big question I want to get to today: what happens when markets expand across everything, everyone, and every hour of the day, and that technology is increasingly underpinned by AI? So that's just to set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. Dave, I want to start with you. Just generally, does society benefit when more things become markets? We were joking around backstage. If I wanted to, I could create a market for whether or not you were going to wear a tie on stage today. Why is that good for society?
Sure. So, look, I think there's generally, obviously, we're in the financial market space. There's a huge amount of value that financial markets generally bring to individuals: ability to transact, ability to get exposure to various different asset classes, invest, grow wealth, all these various different things. Clearly, there's a spectrum here. I think your question kind of goes in the direction of prediction markets. So if we think about prediction markets, there, on one end of the spectrum, are a number of interesting new markets, products that are offered in prediction markets that allow individuals, businesses to hedge various different events, whether it be political events, market events, you name it, that were actually quite difficult before. Wall Street, financial services firms, the big banks, they all spent a huge amount of resource and time trying to construct this convoluted hedge in order to track some potential event or weather event and what have you. And now there's an opportunity to just do that much more efficiently, much more directly. Of course, on the other side of the spectrum, there are a number of prediction markets out there that kind of go in the direction more of, I don't know, entertainment, what tie someone's going to wear, the number of tweets, what have you. And, we're going to see this for sure. We're going to see that spectrum for sure that exists out there. From my standpoint, nothing wrong with, individuals who want to engage in something like that. I mean, it's not necessarily a negatively impactful, nor does it negate the kind of more complex and interesting products for the financial services industry.
So we have this trifecta of mega IPOs coming down the pike: SpaceX, which will list on the Nasdaq, OpenAI, Anthropic. Sarah, I think maybe people think of AI as creating new companies to invest in, and that's fair. But AI is also changing the way that financial markets and financial structure works, right? And the Nasdaq is on the forefront of that. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, over 10 years ago, we almost prepared for this moment. We knew that we needed to start putting markets and data in the cloud. We knew that we needed to embrace algorithmic AI when that was what existed. And we knew that we needed to continue to go towards more modern markets, architecting them, powering innovation, and building trust in the financial system. And with AI, everything that we knew years ago has become more true and accelerated. And so we're very well positioned. We have extraordinary data, and we're able to help our clients, whether they are exchanges, marketplaces, regulators, financial institutions, actually protect themselves and arm themselves with those extraordinary tools when they are well used.
So you have spent much of your career in banking.
I did.
So we've had banking crises, you know that. We've had market crashes, we've had flash crashes. Is it inevitable that someday we're going to have an AI financial crisis of some kind, an event where an autonomous system plays a central role in a stock market crash of some kind?
So when you're looking at the leverage in the financial system, which very often is correlated to some of the crises, it is still fairly contained. Consumers are also very in a place of being able to afford their life, even though their spending has increased. And so we are not seeing here that AI is doing that. We are seeing that AI is an extraordinary force which is driving adoption, which is driving innovation. We are about to release a report that shows that there is more creation of new businesses. So it's not just the very large IPOs, it's also the sole proprietorships that are actually making the idea of becoming an entrepreneur much more affordable, much more doable. And when you think about our role at Nasdaq, we like to connect innovation and capital. And those two things become more efficient, not less efficient, with the use of AI and the digital ledger.
I don't mean to scoop you, Sarah, but if you subscribe to Axios Markets, you would have read about this exact study that you all are launching later this morning, the fact that AI is increasingly driving the solopreneur boom, which is a fascinating economic dynamic. Dave, I feel like before the pandemic, it would have been weird to have someone involved in crypto sitting alongside someone like Sarah, who's at the Nasdaq, which is very traditional Wall Street. And, you know, you're more of like a disruptor, right? Do you see Wall Street and crypto working increasingly together? Are you less enemies and more like frenemies now? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've actually been in this industry for quite some time, in the crypto industry. 2013 was when I initially got in. And yeah, it's been quite a journey. I was previously immediately before getting into crypto, I was at a company, Boston Consulting Group, had a bunch of clients, financial services industry, told many of them, hey, I'm leaving, I'm going to go, found this company in Bitcoin and so forth. And they were like, you are a moron.
You're nuts. Good luck to you.
Complete moron. Yep. And so it's been quite a journey. Now over a decade, and certainly when we first started the company, it was impossible to even, open a checking account for the business and so forth. And so it's certainly a journey from that time until now. Kraken and our broader portfolio of companies, Payward, we're $2 billion plus in revenue and 3,000 employees and so forth. Certainly a sizable business. But I think there are a few things that are happening as these things come together. So first, nearly all traditional financial services companies are going to offer crypto, just natively Bitcoin, Ethereum to their customers. We have, that is a big story of 2026. Most of the large brokers, banks out there are looking to integrate Bitcoin, Ethereum into their offering for their customers. Their high net worth individuals are asking for it, and so in their retail customers are asking for it, their institutions are asking for it. So that's one. Two, crypto native companies are probably going to offer some TradFi products, of which Kraken's our portfolio of products are really on the leading front. I mean, we're significant business now in kind of derivatives for indices, commodities, FX. We offer equities trading, all these various different types of things. But the most interesting is crypto tech and the rails running TradFi products. And I think this is like, the big kind of like MVP, the first product that really nailed this were stablecoins, right? And so we have, over a couple $100 billion market cap out there, trillions in flows running on stablecoins. And that's the first tokenized asset. Take the most liquid, widely held, used asset out there, US dollar previously, right? And tokenize it. That's what a stablecoin basically is. And so we've seen huge adoption there, but it's not going to end there. I mean, I think the next most significant place where we'll see tokenized equity or tokenized assets will be public equities.
I want to come back to that, but I have to ask you, Sarah, you are partnering with Kraken, right? You guys announced a partnership that is aimed at building a future where markets are even more digital, they're more global, and increasingly on. So what excites you about the partnership with Kraken, and what are you hoping to achieve? I have a feeling it comes back to the theme I laid out at the onset, that things are moving faster and are more available to people than ever before.
Yeah. If you take a step back and you look at what's the value of digital ledger as a technology, and the first one is international payments, and stable coins are a very big part of that. The second one is collateral mobility, which is very valuable for investors and financial institutions. And the third one is to make sure that companies, corporates, can be connected to their issuers in a more fluid way.
Yeah.
And that fluid way can also put a little bit more technology into the corporate actions, for example. And so what we have tackled together is to actually build a bridge in some ways between the traditional fiat world and the digital world. But we want to do it in a way that preserves the core components, which are extraordinary, of the US capital markets and of the global capital markets. So you're talking about integrity, transparency, liquidity, and by doing it with two experts at that, we're doing it in the right way, connecting our rails to their rails for the benefit of corporate and investors.
The phrase everyone needs to know is 23.5.
Yes.
Tell us what 23.5 is. And then I feel like, Dave, you're going to jump in and talk about 24/7, which is something we know.
That's
but let's start with 23.5.
Okay, so 23 hours out of 24 and 5 days out of 7 in a week. And so the markets are moving towards always on, as you gave in your preamble. And the first thing is to say people would prefer to play and to trade in their daily hours. So if you're sitting in Asia or if you're sitting in Europe, the 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 US or 9 to 4:30 doesn't work for you. And therefore you want to actually have the same guardrails, the same market structure that you're used to during those day hours into your own daytime. And so that's the reason for 23. In terms of like 5 versus 7, we've done studies and actually looking at the assets that are available on 24/7, and we actually observed that there is very little demand. People don't want to trade during their weekends. They actually want to do weekend things. And therefore, we are focused right now on having depth, liquidity, and therefore enough participation, which we believe is much more achievable in 5 days rather than 7.
Mm-hmm. Dave, what do you think?
Well, the joke was back before we came up here, they mentioned, well, we'll for sure talk about 23.5, and I said, what's
You're like, what is 23.5?
Didn't know what it was. They told me, I was like, okay, I'll talk about 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
So I mostly agree, although, with some tweaks on this here. So, we run 24/7, 365 for cryptocurrency trading, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and,
Anytime you want to trade those assets, you can. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it is true that, various different exchanges in the crypto space tend to have somewhat of a regional bias, although they are, for the most part, the larger ones, such as, Kraken, Payward, are global. And it is true that on average, we see lower volumes, activity, liquidity on weekends for all the reasons mentioned. So that is true. However, a couple of caveats on this. One, if we look at what is what's the work week for individuals in U.S., in Europe, in Asia, of course it doesn't perfectly line up on what is 9 to 5 and the Monday through Friday work week. That's just how the week works, right? We have different time zones and so forth. So we see as the overlap of individuals across these various different geographies does lead to activity. But probably the most significant thing is is we've had some enormous volume liquidity days on the weekends. And that's usually triggered by an event. It's typically triggered by something, an event that spikes activity, volatility. Individuals want to get in, they want to change their positions, invest, and so forth. So while on average, yes, we do see some shifts there, it's not true that it is constant in that way, right? Where we'll see some big spikes when events happen. In fact, a lot of institutions that happen to be invested in both cryptocurrency and TradFi will use cryptocurrency as kind of their first source of liquidity, their first source to get capital if they need it on the weekend because they're not able to access it from other markets. And so we kind of see that happening. So, I think, and then we also, I guess the other piece is like, what's the threshold? We do want to have a minimum level of liquidity. Can we achieve that minimum level of liquidity, 24/7, 365? Depends maybe somewhat on the asset class, but, that's really what we want to target.
And if I may add, please. Collateral management is also participating in that because if you effectively settle your stock in collateral form, then at that point you can move it 24/7, 365 because the moving of the stock is just the mobility that you get on chain. And so that's why it's actually the second trend that I mentioned that's very important and benefits from the digital ledger.
So something to watch. Dave, I want to ask you, Kraken's parent company, Payward, announced last week or a few weeks ago, I'm sorry, time is very difficult these days, you are trying to give retail investors a way in to IPOs, trying to give them access to IPOs, offering tokenized shares in IPOs. So had this been underway for a while, this idea, or is it just coming right in time for these trifecta of huge IPOs that are coming our way?
I think it's, frankly, it's maybe a little bit of both. I mean, obviously, in financial services, as markets evolve, as opportunities evolve and so forth, there's kind of like a general philosophy on our business in that we want to be there for the, most interesting new things that individuals want to invest in. But I think the magic word you said there is access. And that's almost something we haven't talked about. And I think that's there's a whole piece of crypto, a whole piece of, this technology, tokenization, that is about better, faster, cheaper, more access to collateral, 24/7, 365, globally, all those different pieces. But access is actually really what put cryptocurrency on the map, really what put tokenization on the map, what put stablecoins on the map. And so the example is a lot of people, one of the things that drove adoption of stablecoins were individuals around the world wanted to hold US dollars, and it was kind of difficult for them to do so. You're in Colombia, you're in Vietnam, or what have you. It's difficult to open a US dollar bank account. Stablecoins kind of filled that role. We look now at the IPO market, to come back to your original question, and yes, we're trying to bring more access to these IPOs to more individuals, and tokenization, as it's done with many other asset classes, is a path to do that, and that's what we're doing. But it's also kind of ironic here that we're talking about IPOs that are $1 trillion+.
Yeah.
And we have had individual investors largely completely locked out of these investments. Venture capital firms, other investors have made not just millions, tens of millions, billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions on these investments. And individuals, for the most part, have been entirely locked out. So I think that's kind of like an issue. Yes, we're kind of trying to extend access to this IPO as soon as possible, to as many individuals as possible, via where we sit from our global footprint and tokenization, all these types of things. But it's also kind of ironic that in a way, we've already lost as an industry, given that there have been so many individuals locked out of these businesses from an investment standpoint for so long.
Well, I see your point, because it is a shame to think that so many people have missed out on the upside, but the flip side of that is they've been protected from losses on the downside. So, I mean, how do you think about protecting retail investors, but also giving them opportunity to the upside that you described?
I think there's a general trend over the past 40 plus years of more and more access, more and more individuals self-directed in their investment choices versus being more passive. We look in this data, right now it's about 30% of all trades, self-directed. We go back even just a decade, it's 20%. You go back to the early 80s, it's much smaller. And so that's a general trend. That's a general trend because that's what people want. It also ties in with information and data being more accessible, more free, more available. A big part of what we're trying to do in the Payward family of companies, specifically where Kraken was founded, to give individuals the same tools, the same data information that big institutions can have access to. And so when we think about protection, the thing we think about the most, as far as investment choices, is giving them access to the tools and data and information that allow them to make the choices that they want to make.
Sarah, I want to ask you, I know this is a huge week for NASDAQ, given what's happening on Friday. I won't get into the specifics. I know you can't talk about that, but I do have a question about whether our public markets and our index rules are designed for companies of this scale. Do we need to rewrite the rules a little bit? As Dave talks about these trillion-dollar companies, what needs to happen there?
So if you try to look at the numbers, you have 130 trillion in global equity market cap. You've got half of that in the US. It's by far the largest market. And every day you have over 2 trillion that trade. And so you've got an extraordinary system which is very deep, very high integrity, high transparency, that enables to be prepared for both those very small companies that we just talked about that AI is going to bring into the productivity and the growth of the economy, as well as those larger companies that also benefit from this depth, integrity, transparency that the US capital markets provide, and now that it's moving towards 23/5 to the entire world.
We are out of time. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining Axios Live. And I hope to talk to you guys again soon. Hope to do this again in 50 years.
In 50 years.
Kelly Loeffler leads the Small Business Administration after a career spanning finance, entrepreneurship, and national politics. At a time when small businesses are navigating economic uncertainty, AI disruption, and changing consumer habits, she's focused on how Main Street competes in an evolving economic environment. Loeffler's perspective bridges growth, public policy, and the long-term resilience of America's economy.
Thank you. Thank you, Axios AM Live. Administrator Loeffler, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mike. It's
Please
an honor.
have a seat.
Thank you so much.
So our next guest is an entrepreneur, leader, sports executive, philanthropist, senator, and now cabinet member. Kelly Loeffler, the 28th administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration, started on a family farm. Is this true? You didn't have heat upstairs?
No heat in the 100-year-old farmhouse upstairs, but heat rises to the top. So if you heat the basement, it rises up.
And after 25 years building a financial services and technology company from 100 employees up, and you are the pride of Bloomington, Illinois.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Administrator Loeffler, we appreciate the honor of having you on our stage, and you spend the majority of your time on the road. You've been in 40 states, I understand, since you took office. What are you learning out there? And I understand you have your own spin on Shark Tank.
Absolutely. Well, yes, I've been in at least 40 states, many of them twice. And the reason I travel the country, because I know that from my time serving in the US Senate, from my time working on Main Streets as a young person waitressing or building small businesses myself, that the only way you can learn about the real economy is getting outside the bubble of Washington, which is a great place to make policy once you're informed by Main Street. And so what I'm seeing on Main Street is real optimism that the turnaround in this economy in terms of the excitement over the tax cuts. The working family tax cuts are rocket fuel for Main Street, and their importance cannot be overstated. So it saved us from now what they've calculated about a $5 trillion tax increase. And when you think about 29 million Americans benefited from no tax on overtime, that single provision alone, and the vast majority, 90% making less than 100, 200,000 a year, this has real Main Street impacts. But what I see from small businesses is they can invest now. Business owner after business owner has pointed to me in their factory where they're punching out the wall to add more equipment and workers, where they've built a new building. One owner called it the big, beautiful building because he was able to build that building, know it was 100% expensing, and have that immediate rocket fuel to build his business. And then inspired by all these incredible small businesses, we were talking backstage about who I admire as an entrepreneur, and I said, it's really the hardworking men and women I meet on Main Street who are building these businesses, who are reshoring our industrial capacity. I thought, for America 250, let's celebrate them and have the Patriot Pitch competition, which everyone who has used an SBA service should apply for. $1 million in prizes, sponsored by one of our great sponsors private sector sponsor who's willing to put in the cash and essentially compete for $1 million in the September competition. So I'm really excited to highlight our Main Street job creators, our innovators who are building the next generation, whether it's drones or made in America manufacturing, automotive, defense. So there's so much to see out in Main Street. I want to highlight it here in Washington at the Patriot Pitch. Go to sba.gov and sign up for the Patriot Pitch.
Boom. Administrator, you personally are an AI early adopter, and you see AI as opportunity. You see AI helping small businesses become more efficient and profitable. Tell us what you're discovering, how you personally use AI, and your advice for small businesses.
Well, I certainly have seen technology. I'm old enough to have seen multiple technology transformations, and I think AI is just another such incidents, but one that we're seeing really at massive scale. And so as I talk to small businesses in walking factory floors with them, really it's 9 out of 10 will say, absolutely, I have to use it. It is taking my production planning time from 2 or 3 weeks or a month even to a day or two. It's creating new efficiencies in my quality engineering. It's creating efficiency for my workers. I'm able to hire more workers now and onboard them more quickly. So what we are seeing is where there's AI adjacencies, there's actually more hiring going on, and there's actually better paying jobs available. So I think it's really powerful for small businesses, and it's going to level the playing field. Imagine if you're a small defense manufacturer and you're trying to compete with the big primes, you're going to want every advantage. That's AI. And I think as we saw with the internet, that just created a whole new boom in jobs. And we know that in the 1940s, 50s, we had 56 million jobs. Our compute power has risen asymptotically, and now we have like 180 million jobs in this country. We're at all-time record employment as compute has gone up, and I think that's only going to continue, and I think the biggest beneficiaries are going to be small businesses.
And that's counter to the narrative that you sometimes see or hear about AI and jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a narrative that is either intentionally or unintentionally misplaced, and I'm not sure where it's coming from, but I do think this is going to be a powerful engine for fueling growth on Main Street, for fueling job creation. Look, we have 7.5 million open jobs in America right now. Almost 500,000 in manufacturing, and particularly in the trades, where we have, for every 5 workers requiring in the skilled trades, we only have 2 or 3 people replacing them. And when I talk to factory owners, particularly whether it's welders or HVAC, they are looking for technological advancements to help them bring those workers in more quickly, get them skilled up. And now when I see workers, we're able to reshore whole industries because of things, not just AI, but things like smart manufacturing, automation. One worker can run 3 or 4 CNC machines, and that's going to make us able to compete with China. So it is a huge leveler of the playing field for America. This is AI winning the AI arms race is absolutely vital. If China wins, this is going to be really problematic for the entire country, but particularly for Main Streets.
And what's smart manufacturing?
Well, smart manufacturing is all the, whether it's automation or the advances that we have in production planning, robotic welding, that lets us do things for the same cost as they do it in China now. And that is why we're going to be able to reshore things. We are a nation of builders again because President Trump believes in the American worker and American industry, and he understands that we must win the technological race on any front, not just AI, but drones, warfare, pharmaceuticals. Look what he's done in pharmaceuticals. This is just part of putting the American agenda first in front of, the onslaught of our competitors, whether they're allies or adversaries.
Administrator Loeffler at the Small Business Administration, one of your signature phrases is "make onshoring great again." Do tell.
Well, so when you think about onshoring, sometimes the resources are already here and we just don't know it. So what we decided to do was to create a portal available to all manufacturers across this country, large and small, on the SBA website. And the Make Onshoring Great Again portal merges 4 directories of domestic suppliers of everything from defense production to green tea to coffee, anything that you might say, well, we just don't make that in America. Well, check our portal. It's free of charge, and it lists over 1 million suppliers of producers in America. And the SBA is so committed to manufacturing that we've given a 90% government guarantee on the manufacturing loans. We've doubled the size to $10 million. And we're making sure to make it low cost, so we're waiving the fees because most manufacturers in America, 98% of them, are small businesses.
So we first met when you were on the road as a senator. You worked hard on the campaign in the vital state of Georgia, a leader in the inauguration. And when President Trump truthed to announce your nomination, he said that you were going to reduce red tape and unleash opportunity for small businesses to grow, innovate, and thrive. What have you done with existing SBA programs to increase access to capital?
Well, first of all, we got the programs back on track. Under the prior administration, they had loosened the guardrails and the programs were bleeding money. And so that money wasn't getting out to small businesses, it was going into default. So we got the program back on track. We got the agency back in office. 90% have been working from home. We refocused on the founding mission in the 1950s of advancing the interests of small businesses and growing the US economy. And as a result of that, we were able to put out record capital in year 1 while cutting regulations nearly $100 billion, because we know that in addition to taxes, one of small businesses' biggest concern is the massive burden of regulation, which grew by $5 trillion during the last administration, creating 355 hours of additional regulation on average for small business owners. And so we've been really fighting the massive regulatory red tape burden with pretty good effectiveness, certainly across the entire administration, reducing 120 regulations for each new regulation.
And I think you had the first loan program that's specifically designed for the manufacturing sector.
That's right. So we have manufacturers access to revolving credit. That allows our manufacturers to flexibly access lines of capital that may not be traditionally available at banking institutions because of the nature of working capital. And that's been a really popular addition to the portfolio. Access to capital is small businesses' top need. When you think about expansion, you need to know that that capital is there, lock in that rate, and then you can grow. And so we really have worked at refining and modernizing the loan programs. We have some exciting things coming on the customer service front. We're really reorienting the agency to be technology and customer driven as opposed to bureaucracy driven.
And our viewers around the world can see in the corner of our screen, we can see here in DC that this Axios AM Live event is built around America's 250th. What is you personally and the SBA doing to celebrate America's 250th or tied to that?
Well, it's incredibly exciting. 250 years of free enterprise. I mean, America is a nation of founders again, and it's almost as if on cue, we have record business formation happening in this country in our 250th year of free enterprise, and I think there's no better way to celebrate it through our Patriot Pitch competition than to highlight those small businesses, but we're also going to be rolling out across Main Streets, giving small businesses the opportunity to sign up to be a Freedom 250 business and have that certificate in their small business to celebrate, because that's really where America thrives, is across Main Streets, and we're going to be getting that out very soon.
And what is that certificate? What do I have to do to get it, and what does it do for me?
Yeah, we'll be announcing it soon. We'll be having a website, a portal you can sign up for, get that beautiful America 250 certificate, display it proudly, and make sure that people know that we're all celebrating this great milestone together.
One fun thing, you have such a fascinating life. We're going to do a few fun things. I have to ask you, as we talk about America's 250, a little bit of an event coming up Sunday. It might be Flag Day. It might be the president's birthday. It might be UFC 250 on the South Lawn of the White House. Administrator, what do you have up your sleeve for Sunday?
Oh, I'll be at the UFC fight. I'm incredibly excited to see this, how it all unfolds. The structure behind the White House is truly epic. It is amazing. And so I can't wait for that. I'm excited to take my niece and nephew. That's really exciting. And then just being part of the entire 250 celebration throughout this summer. I mean, so much to come. And so what a fun way to kick off summer and all of the festivities. And of course, it's President Trump's birthday, so I wouldn't miss it.
At Axios, one of my newsletters, Axios Finish Line, which is about life leadership, we're big on life lessons. Administrator, I wonder if you have one life lesson from your time as a waitress.
As a waitress, look, I started bussing tables, and when I was 15. I started waitressing when I was 16. So I think my advice coming from that was just get started. I mean, I loved waitressing, but I couldn't get there until I was a good bus person. So I started bussing tables, rolled up the sleeves, did that. Waitress through high school and college. Loved serving people, learning how to have different, service levels for the different places I served at. But I would say the biggest thing for me is the value of hard work. Like, I loved showing up on time, being there for the owners of the small businesses I worked at, but being there for the customers, and it just gave me such a good view into Main Street businesses and hard work. And I love hard work. I have a passion for it. So that's what it taught me.
Before your drop the mic moment, I want to thank Planet Word for having us here. Thank Anthropic for making these conversations possible. We're doing events across the country with Anthropic that we're very excited about. Thank my Axios Live colleagues who've worked for months to bring this together. Thank all of you for joining, both in the room and around the world. And Administrator Loeffler, for a decade, you were a WNBA owner. You were co-owner of the Atlanta Dream. You love basketball. You still follow it. We've got a 2-1 NBA Finals. I got to ask you, Knicks or Spurs, first with your head and then with your heart?
I'll make it easy. Knicks. I'm an old school basketball fan. The reason I got into WNBA ownership was because of the Bulls run in the 90s. So I'm all about old school NBA. We got to bring back the Knicks and make sure that they stay on top. So let's see where we go in the next game.
Thank you, Anthropic. Thank you, Axios fans. And thank you, Administrator Loeffler, for a great conversation.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'll see you on Axios.com.
Thank you, guys.
And I will see you upstairs at the reception. We can try the quad typewriter together. So upstairs they have